You're listening to Where You Live with Gene and Tony.
Welcome back to Where You Live. We are asking the question, what is reasonable? We want to ask right now, when does HOA enforcement become unreasonable? The issue that we are dealing with is something that happened in Huntersville, North Carolina. And the question is, can a homeowner association come after your property for doing something you think is good for your neighborhood? That kind of question prompted Mecklenburg State Representative Beverly Earle to propose changes in the Condominium Act in North Carolina, and we'll get to that in a moment. But here is the situation. A homeowner by the name of Jim Lane is facing some major fines from his association. He lives in the Gilead Ridge Homeowners Association, and they have rules against property owners doing their own landscaping and work in the common areas. So
Right.
We're not talking about areas that he has exclusive use for, but the common areas. And I have seen this video, Tony, and we're talking about in this association, there are homes that live in sort of the road is sort of in a circular fashion, and in the very middle there's a nice big area,
Green space? Okay.
that is landscaped. And what Jim Lane thought was that it looked kind of sparse, and so on his own, he started planting, and he was kind of upset when the association said, "Don't do this.
Stop doing it."
Stop doing it." And he said, everybody comes by and says how great everything looks, but the HOA is fining him $100 for planting in the common area, and then they are imposing an additional fine each day for him not taking it out. A letter sent from the HOA attorney says if the fines remain unpaid, then the Gilead Ridge Homeowners Association will proceed with filing a lien and potentially moving towards foreclosure. Now, that has responded in this legislator writing House Bill 165, which proposes, and listen to this, it says that an executive board acting on behalf of the association does not have to take enforcement action if facts and circumstances show that although a violation may exist or may have occurred, it is not so material as to be objectionable to a reasonable person or to justify expending the association's resources.
Wow, this brings up so much. And I got to be fast. The association doesn't want people planting things everywhere in the common areas because many things. Aesthetics is an issue, and maintaining that landscaping is an issue. If I start planting shrubs out in the common green space, the association has to maintain it, correct?
Yes,
Okay,
that's right.
That's a cost of the association. Now, the solution that this state legislator is coming up with is, well, then we'll say that the board doesn't have to enforce the association's rules and regulations. That's how we'll deal with this issue.
Okay.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you one thing. I thought we had to take one more break here before we go, but it looks like we don't. So we
Okay.
are on time, so we've got time.
Okay, I'll slow it down.
Yeah,
then.
we
I'll
can.
calm down. I thought I had to talk fast.
Yes. Okay. In this particular situation here, I think it is very reasonable for an association to say to a homeowner, you don't have a right that supersedes, and that's what we're talking about, that supersedes everybody else in the HOA to determine what should or shouldn't be in the common areas.
Yeah. There's other ways to approach this. Jim could say, hey, you know what? I'll chair a landscaping committee for the association, and we'll talk about improvements that we think would be nice, and we'll recommend them to the board.
Yes,
right?
We have that at the HOA where my wife and I live. We have there is a landscape committee, and there are a group of volunteers that every year that approached the board a number of years ago and said, we want to spruce things up a little bit, and we'll plant flowers, and we're going to do, and they had a plan, and they shared their plan. The board said, boy, that sounds really nice, and they said, we'll take care of it. And what the association allowed is, I think they may allow a small amount of money to be set aside for this group.
Materials, yeah.
And they also allow at the annual meeting and at our ice cream social and then at the barbecue that we have later in the year to raise funds for that too. That's a really nice thing to do,
Yep.
but it's done because it's done in agreement by the homeowners association. Here, this Jim Lane is presupposing that what he finds beautiful, that everybody else is too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
don't we know that that could not be the case?
Everyone thinks they have good taste.
Yeah.
But really, your community needs to control these situations for cost reasons and aesthetic reasons. So what about this idea that, okay, we'll take care of this issue once and for all by just saying the board does not have to enforce all its rules?
Yeah, when you take a look at it, it's really ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it says nothing. Talk
Yeah.
about a waste of time and effort. Let's read that one more time.
The state legislature at
House
work.
bill says, basically, they're saying, we want you to know that an executive board acting on behalf of the association does not have to take enforcement action. I think they knew that, folks, that they don't have to take enforcement if, they don't have to be as specific on something. But if the people in that association are concerned, if the people have given them feedback about something, then the board, in being responsible, needs to act. And the one thing that concerns me about this, Tony, is that this could give, I think, permission for some boards to construe this as a way of selecting what they will enforce and what they won't.
Yeah, you get in some very shaky territory there when all of a sudden now it's way too subjective. If you're telling the board they don't have to enforce rules, then, like you just said, it's giving them some leeway to say, okay, we're going to enforce this rule for this person, but we won't enforce that rule for this person over here. Then where are you headed? You're headed toward discrimination accusations, fair housing violations, a whole can of worms.
Oh, isn't that the truth? I remember years ago, an association I was managing, and we could not get to the repair of all the gutters in front of the homes where people lived. And the association had a plan, and it was a 2-year plan, so we took care of half.
Okay.
And the other half was going to be the next year.
Okay.
Well, because it was thought out, it was planned, we stated that, we let people know even before the project began, that's how it would be tackled.
Yep.
We still had someone who came forward and said, wait, you didn't take care of this maintenance issue with my gutters. You're discriminating against me.
Yeah,
And the association found themselves having to explain themselves.
They had to defend that? Wow.
What could have been a discrimination lawsuit.
Yeah. Why have rules? I mean, you have to have rules in order to live together, and then to say that the rules don't have to be enforced is kind of crazy. Yeah. And to base it on what a reasonable person, we've been talking about being reasonable all day today. Reasonable is a subjective judgment. What you and I think are reasonable, Gene, may not be reasonable to the next person. It's just way too gray. Yeah, and in this particular case, like we said, it is fair for the association as a whole to say, we will determine together what we think is a good use of our common areas. A couple of the things to stop and think about that people don't. I mean, if you were to put all kinds of new plantings in a common area, number one, does that increase the costs for your grounds care company because they have to now work around certain items? It can. That comes up all the time. People want to put these solar landscape lights around their shrubs. They look really nice, but then your landscaper comes along trimming shrubs and just knocks them all apart. That's happened in associations I've managed, and the association won't take responsibility for that. How about because they don't want to pay for those things? Yeah. How about something that would be considered
more of an invasive species. You know, a few years ago, people thought buckthorn was a beautiful planting, and some people use that for very thick hedgerows.
Yep.
But there are other people that don't like it because it just takes over and kills
Wipes everything else
kills
out.
everything
Yeah.
else out. That may not be what someone wants to
Yeah.
see.
Let me ask this question. Earlier in the article, they mentioned that because this guy had violated the rules and fines had been imposed that he hadn't paid, it could spark a foreclosure action
Now,
by the association.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
in Minnesota, I don't know that would take place. I think that we have a lot of law that has sort of set precedent in that area. And I think when you have someone who is delinquent in the money they owe the association because of the basic operating
Right.
assessment for the association, people can
That's
foreclose.
that's a
legitimate
reasonable measure
Yes.
of when a foreclosure should take
But
place.
I have seen other cases where people have pushed because it ends up being sort of a grudge match, you know.
Yeah.
And in this case, I'm wondering because here it said that the association gave an initial fine and then a daily fine. And every time I see that daily fine,
does that just make you cringe?
yeah, you know, that's not
Is that reasonable?
that's not gonna
Yeah.
fly. All that's
Yeah.
doing is causing the other person to dig in their heels.
Yeah.
And they're not going to move. And then you try and get them out now because of hundreds and thousands of dollars of fines like that.
Right.
I think you're going to find that you're on shaky ground,
Right.
and you're not going to find that that's collectible.
I tell my leasing staff all the time, here's a document. This is what we have to be careful of. Here's what the state statute is. This is kind of a gray area. How much can we fine for this offense? I always have in mind, how will I explain this in front of the judge? Will I sound reasonable when I explain this fine or this action on behalf of the landlord? Will the judge think that's a reasonable explanation? And I think homeowners associations need to think about that too. If you're standing in front of a judge saying, we're going to kick this person out of their home, we're going to take their home from them because we decided to fine them $100 a day for planting pansies, is that going to pass the reasonableness test in a court of law? I would think not.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. Unfortunately, with everything that we're seeing being brought up, it makes you wonder if people understand what that word
Yeah.
reasonable means anymore. You
yeah,
know?
exactly.
But in this particular case, you're getting down to a situation in this instance with this gentleman where he is insisting that and this is it, his rights supersede that of the majority of the folks in that association.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like that's all we have time for today. Folks, thanks for joining us here on Where You Live. Join us next week. Till then, have a great week.